Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cosy Rosie UK, and today I am sharing with you the side panel for the Cable and Crossed Cardigan. Whichever neckline you're going for, either the square neck or the V-neck, these are the rows you need to do before you move on to shaping your shoulders and creating that neckline. I'm continuing on using my Sirdar dual spun Aran and the hook size that was determined by my gauge swatch. I'm not assuming that you've already made your back panel because some people like to make their side panels first because they're quicker. I'm using a 5.5mm hook with this Sirdar dual spun Aran weight yarn. It is a lightweight Aran, so you may need to check your gauge before you start. There is a whole video on gauging this particular yarn for this pattern, which I've linked in the top right hand corner for you. Please make sure you've done your gauge swatch. And if you're carrying on from your back panel, follow the same size instructions for your back panel, making sure you do the same number of repeats, depending on which length you're making as well. Got some stitch markers, a pair of scissors, and of course a darning needle, because we are going to fasten off at the end of these panels, and you do need to make two of them because there's a left and a right. So make your one, fasten off, make your second one. You can carry on to make your left or your right panel with whichever first one you make. I must admit that I'd go on and finish the shoulder shaping and the neckline of my own side panel, but it's up to you which order you do. If you make one side panel, then make your neckline, and then make your second panel in full, it's entirely up to you. But these rows are going to take you up to that shoulder shaping, ready to create your shoulder, and then choose your neckline as well. So in the description box, you will find a link to the written pattern specifically for the side panel. That's on a separate blog post on my website. You'll also find a link to the playlist for this cardigan, along with links to purchase the printable pattern if you'd like to go down that route as well. So gather those materials and let's get started. Now this cardigan is worked bottom up in turned rows. And I'm not going to assume you have already made your back panel, so I'm going to treat this as your first time making these stitches, even though you should have already done a gauge swatch and be familiar with them. The sizing of this pattern are given from extra small all the way up to 5XL in order. I'll try and remember to tell you which stitch is which when it comes to the sizing. I'll try and remember to tell you which stitch count is which stitch count, for depending on the size as we move through as well. Just like the back panel, there are two different ways to make that foundation row of your pattern. So whichever version you're using for your back panel, you need to do the same for your side panels so they have the same stretch. The two options are either foundation single crochet, that's a US term, where you work row one or your foundation row at the same time as your chain, also known as a chainless foundation, or you can be like me and just work into the back bump of your chain, which I will tell you how in a moment. Let's get started on these chains. So if you are making a chain for your side panel, the extra small needs to make a chain of 35, smalls will be making a chain of 39, medium will be doing 43, large will be 47, extra large will be 51, 55 for the 2XL, 59 for the 3XL, 63 for the 4XL, and 67 for the 5XL. If you wanted to make a chainless foundation or use that foundation single crochet, you need to do 34 for an extra small, 38 for a small, 42 for a medium, 46 for a large, 50 for an extra large, 54 for a 2XL, 58 for a 3XL, and 62 for a 4XL, finally 66 for a 5XL. So continue on to make your chain, and if you're working into your chain like I am, I'll meet you in a moment for the rest of our foundation row. So once you have made your foundation chain, we are, instead of working underneath that top loop of our chain, we're going to flip our chain over and work into these back bumps. So from the side you can see them really clearly. It's kind of in the middle of the top of the chain. So that's the right side of our chain, and there are those back bumps. This is the first one we can't work into. So we're going to insert our hook under the second chain from hook into that back bump, which is really hard to do on camera. Try that again. Just into that back bump of our chain and work your US single crochet in the same way as normal. Once you've got that first one done, the back bumps are a bit more apparent and it's easy to get your hook into them. And we're simply working one single crochet into each of our chains across. The reason I recommend working into the back bump as opposed to under that first loop of your chain is it does create the look of a foundation single crochet without the hard work, and it's much stretchier and softer than I would traditionally work through just that top loop of that chain. So it's a little bit fiddlier, but not as fiddly as doing a foundation single crochet, in my opinion. It's entirely up to you which way you make yours, as long as you get that right stitch count. So continue across, working one single crochet into each of the back bumps, and I'll meet you at the end of our foundation row to confirm those stitch counts and go on to starting our side panels. I just had to pull my work out because I hadn't pressed record. So at the end of your foundation row, you should have a nice line of single crochets. If yours is a little bit twiddly, please don't worry, mine is too. It will straighten out as we add those additional rows onto our project. So for our foundation row, you should have a stitch count. For an extra small, you should have 34 single crochets, 38 for a small, 42 for a medium, 46 for a large, 50 for your extra large, 54 for your 2XL, 58 for your 3XL, 62 for your 4XL, and 66 for your 5XL. Now going into row 1, we are going straight into our special stitch, which, if you haven't already worked your back panel, is the cable stitch. We start with our chain of 3, and that chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. So because it counts, it means we don't work into that stitch underneath our chain 3, so we're ignoring that one. And our cable stitch is actually worked over 4 stitches. I'm going to yarn over ready because we're going to skip the next stitch, inserting into the next along again. So we don't work into the first one. We're skipping the next and working the first of 3 double crochets into that next stitch. So that's number 1. We're going to work a second double crochet into the next, and then we work a third double crochet into the next along. So we have 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and to finish the cable stitch, we're going to work back into that stitch that we skipped. So we yarn over, reach over and insert into that skipped stitch. I'm going to release the bit of the tension on my yarn here, because when we yarn over, we're going to bring it all the way up to the height of our row before we yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops and pull through the last 2. And what we're aiming to do is to kind of wrap those 3 double crochets in the cable basically, and it is actually a double-sided stitch, but this is the right side of our project that's facing us. We're then going to repeat this across, so you can see that there is a stitch coming out of this stitch here, so we're not going to work into there. We're going to skip the next and work into this next stitch here with the first of 3 double crochets into the next 3 stitches. So we yarn over and bring it up to work our first stitch, just double checking that I have skipped a stitch, and that's the last one I worked into. So there's number 1, double crochet into the next and double crochet into the next again. And then we're going to work back into that skip stitch again. So we're yarning over, inserting into the skip stitch, bring that loop up, pull through 2, pull through 2. And what we're looking for is to not work too tightly around this group of stitches, because we don't want them to be too tight, but we also don't want it to be too loose either. So it's kind of getting that balance, but it comes with practice. So we'll work another one together. So you can see where we've worked into this stitch here, because there's something coming out of it. We skip the next, work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. So that's 1, 2, and 3. We're then going to yarn over and working back into that skip stitch, bringing a loop up to the height of our stitches, pull through 2, pull through 2. We're going to repeat this all the way across, and once you've worked your last cable stitch, you should have just 1 stitch remaining, and that's where I'm going to meet you at the end of row 1. So continue across working those cable stitches. I've just worked my last double crochet before finishing my last cable stitch, because this is a real common issue, is that people forget to work back. You just want to get the row finished. So do make sure that you've worked that last cable before your last stitch, otherwise your stitch count will be out by 1. So in that final stitch, we're just going to work 1 double crochet to finish our row. So we have a double crochet at each end, and then depending on which size you're making, you'll have a number of cable stitches. So you just need to count the cable stitches, not the stitch count, thank goodness. So for extra small, you will have 8 cable stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got the right amount, that's good. For a small, there will be 9. Medium will have 10, large will have 11, extra large would have 12. You can guess what's happening here, can't you? 2XL will have 13, 3XL will have 14, 4XL will have 15, and 5XL will have 16 cable stitches. Going into row 2, we begin with a turning chain of 1, which does not count, which means we're going to work a US single crochet into the same stitch as our chain 1, and we're simply working 1 single crochet into each stitch across to the end of the row. So continue across, working 1 single crochet into the top of each stitch across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 2. So the last stitch needs to be worked into the 3rd chain of that beginning chain 3 we did in the last row. So you can see I've got 1, 2, there's number 3. Of course it's tiny. So it's always worth just pushing your hook through and working into that 3rd chain, so it will help keep your edges really straight. Yes, I am still curly, so if you are, please don't worry. Bit of a stretch out and it's almost perfect. So at the end of row 2, you should have 34 single crochets for an extra small, 38 for a small, 42 for a medium, 46 for a large, 50 for an extra large, 54 for a 2XL, 58 for a 3XL, 62 for a 4XL, and 66 for a 5XL. Going into row 3, we're going to work our cross double crochets. So we start with a chain of 3. Again, that counts as our first double crochet, so we don't work into that first stitch, and we're going to skip the next as well. So we're yarning over, that's where our chain 3 is, we're skipping this one and working into that one. We're going to start with our double crochet, and then to create that cross double crochet, we yarn over, working back into that skip stitch. It's like a little bit like a mini cable stitch. So we have the same little cross at the bottom, and we're going to repeat this all the way across. We skip the next stitch, working a double crochet into the next, before working back into that skip stitch with another double crochet. We're going to repeat this all the way across, skipping 1 stitch, working a double crochet into the next, before working back into that skipped stitch. Continue across and you should finish with just 1 stitch remaining, and of course that's where I'm going to meet you at the end of row 3. I've just got my last stitch to work into, and we're simply working 1 double crochet into that last stitch. I do love how cute these stitches look together. Double checking, I did cross at the end there, I did. So at the end of row 3, you should have 1 double crochet at each end, and then you should also have 16 cross double crochets for your extra small, 18 for your small, 20 for your medium, 22 for your large, 24 for your extra large, 26 for your 2XL, 28 for your 3XL, 30 for your 4XL, and 32 cross double crochets for your 5XL. Now row 4 is simply a repeat of row 2. So we're making a turning chain of 1, working 1 single crochet into the same as our chain 1, and then working 1 single crochet into the top of each stitch across. Continue across, repeating row 2, and I'll meet you at the end of row 4, the number of repeats you need to do to get up to the shoulder shaping. I'm just working my last single crochet, repeating row 2. So your stitch count should be the same as it was for row 2. And now we're going to go through the number of repeats you need to do to make your panel long enough to get up to your shoulder shaping. Now the number of rows you're going to need to do is dependent on the length you are making your cardigan. There are 3 choices to be made. If you've already made your back panel, you need to do the same number of repeats as you did for your back panel. So if you made any adjustments, you need to do the same number. If you're just starting out with your side panel, because I know the way people work, then I'm going to go through the number of repeats you need to do depending on which length again, and it's basically the same. So the first length is of course the hip length. So to create the hip length, you're going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 for a further 9 times for an extra small and a small. For a medium, large, extra large, 2 and 3XL, you're going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 8 more times. And then for a 4XL, you're going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 7 more times. 5XL is going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 a further 6 times. For the tunic length, extra small and small are going to repeat rows 1 to 4 a further 13 times. Medium, large, extra large, 2 and 3XL are going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 for a further 12 times. 4XL will be repeating them 11 more times, and 5XL will be repeating them 10 more times. For your thigh length, you're going to be repeating rows 1 to 4 16 times for a small and an extra small, 15 times for a medium, large, extra large, 2 and 3XL. That was 15 times, and then a 4XL is repeating it for 14 more times, and 5XL is repeating for 13 more times. So continue on to work your repeats all the way up to the shaping of your shoulders. Once you've worked those repeats, if you want to, make your second panel, or I will meet you for your first shoulder shaping. Make sure you've chosen which neckline you want to do, because they are in separate videos. So there's a video for the left square neck, right square neck, left V-neck, right V-neck. Make sure you're going to be following the right video for the right neckline, and I will see you there to make those shoulder shapings and create our necklines.